IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I am Kingshuk, a researcher at the Takshashila Institution. With me is my colleague Dr. Nithyanandam Yogeshwaran, a professor at the Takshashila Institution. Today we'll discuss the recent development in Doklam Plateau based on his analysis of using satellite imagery and geospatial intelligence of the region. Hello Nithya, it's great to have you in All Things Policy.
Hi, Kingshu. It's my pleasure to be part of today's episode of All Things Policy. As you rightly said, we are going to discuss about our recent finding of our Takshashila Geospatial Bulletin newsletter. In this edition, we talked about unveiling the dragon's footprint, especially the geospatial intelligence output of recent developments in Doklam Plateau.
Yeah, it has been over 6 years since Indian and the Chinese soldiers were involved in a tense standoff, lasting for more than 2 months. When Indian soldiers entered the Doklam Plateau to prevent China extending a road that it was illegally constructing that posed a serious security threat to the Shiliguri corridor. Despite the both countries agreeing to disengage, as you wrote in your newsletter, PLA continues to expand its presence in Doklam Plateau. Can you explain the recent PLA activities in the region?
Yeah, before we get into the recent activities, I just thought of bringing it, as you said, after 2017 standoff between China and India, especially when they tried to build road very close to the Indian border on the plateau called Doklam. So, Doklam is a plateau which is located, surrounded by hills, which is Dokala, Sinchela, Merugla, and one side you have Jamferi Ridge. So, this area has been, considered as an area with a lot of disputes between Bhutan and China over these years. Now, India has been in standoff and shouldering Bhutan on this issue, and especially when the Chinese force has reached closer to the Indian border, the Indian, there's a standoff exists between India and China in 2017. Now, why this is considered as a threat? It is considered as a threat because from there you can get a clear access to the Siliguri corridor. The Siliguri corridor is chicken neck, which is a point which is you can say, it can intersect, which can bisect India and the larger part of India and the northeast part of India. So now, if somebody gets an access to the Siliguri corridor, it is an easy chance to bisect the northeast part of India from the rest of the Indian land. So that is why it's considered as a sensitive issue, and and the standoff happened, in order to prevent further developments in the region. It happened in 2017, and thereafter, people has been monitoring this place. So what happens thereafter? In our study, we have identified there's plenty of development activities still ongoing on this plateau. We have identified around 16 sites, out of which almost 12 sites are exactly on the plateau, and the remaining 4 are on the around it. And these 12 sites are places which are, some are facing directly to the Indian side, some are on the leeward slope of the mountain. So this is like the activities involves more number of trenches, more number of military structures, more presence on strategic locations, because these locations can give you know, clear view to the Indian side, not only from the previous standoff position. They have tried to occupy different elevation portions which are spread up in that area. Now, this can again pose a threat to us, because they are increasing their presence, and they are occupying different areas where it can give an advantage in terms of elevation, while it may, possess a threat to our Indian borders.
Like, if I can continue just what you have said now, till now, I think India had that a geographical advantage, for that matter, a tactical advantage. And after the disengage, like when both countries decided to, disengage, like after what happened in 2017, but still it is continuing. And like our readers and those would be interested to going through your newsletter, so there you have explained, like with number of sites and in detail. So in site number one, you have said, no, the PLA has made military fortification of the site, which included solar panel, communication trenches, communication towers. So like two things it seems to emerge. Firstly, it seems that India A would be losing their geographical advantage, and top of that, China is furtherly reinforcing its position, like by this new construction. So, like,
Uh, I, I, I don't think so. In a way, India is losing its advantage. India has its own advantage on our side, and necessary, combating aspects are carried out, and necessary efforts are taken out on our side. While we are seeing this, there are activities they are trying to build up their more of presence on this area, which is a threat. I don't see there's an advantage out of it, but there is a threat, because the presence is increasing. If you look at the satellite imagery, since you've taken site number one, you can look at during standoff. For readers, I just like to explain a bit. So how we are taken images in our study is a satellite photograph of 2017, 2019, 2021, and 2023 of all the of all the 16 sites in the region, because this gives us an idea of what happened during the standoff in in a particular place, and what happens 2 years after the standoff, what happens 4 years after the standoff, and what is the current scenario in the beginning of this year. Now, if you look at site number one, for example, the more structures have come up, especially some shelters which are which can hold larger people and which can support larger people, and on the ground has come up in this recent period. And solar panels, of course, are there for providing the necessary electricity in this area. And we can see increased number of trenches in this area. What we can able to infer out of it is the activities are intense between 2019 and 2021, and thereafter it started stabilize these days. When I say stabilize, it means the activity is not much in recent days in the areas which are already intensified at activities in 2019 and 2021, but they are still exploring new sites where the excavation activities and the construction activities are ongoing.
so continuing this, like, can you explain two things? So that means in number of the areas, like as you have said, like, in recent past they are not making any new construction, but have they gained a sort of competitive advantage over India with their fortification? That's why they are not going for new construction, or like how what is the analysis saying that way? Because you are doing it for the last 4 years, like you're studying the imageries, as you have said, and you are using your own set of spatial scale of geospatial intelligence in that, over like what has happened in the last 4 years. So
So let's look at like this: the activity on any particular point in the region is not happening overnight. It all starts by constructing a proper road to that particular point where they want to build. And thereafter, things are happening slowly. That's what the trend I can infer it from all the images. If earlier these used to be, the places where we can have what you call say low level patrolling and a bit of civilian herdings on these areas, where those jeep tracks are now converted into roads in most of the areas. When I say roads, the roads which can allow them to move their military vehicles to the higher elevated positions on the region and to move people as well. Now, many of the areas, many of the mountain peaks in this region, in this very small area like Doklam Plateau, are getting occupied. As a first step, the roads are started to come and then the roads are getting developed full fledged. Once a road is completed, we can see development at the end of the road, which is most likely either, as I said, either on top of the mountain, which looks at the Indian side, or on the leeward side, where they can do some activities without having a sight from the Indian, borders. So, but this is happening slowly, and the strategic the key positions that they have are getting fortified in a sense with more of infrastructure, more of vehicles, more of permanent structures and communication towers, helipads per se, and also some you can say the dumps, especially we can expect it as bunkers and ammunition dumps. Those are all coming up in this region.
Yeah, but the Doklam tri-junction issue has become a focal geopolitical tension between India and China. Like it happened in 2017, but it has got a historical root. In a series of geopolitical maneuver between the then British India Empire and the King dynasty of China, and still it is playing on. So, how you see those impact have on the current standoff, like the historical issues?
Yeah, I would say if anybody who is interested on reading this particular aspect, I believe the previous document called the Doklam Imbrogli from Takshashila Institution has a great detail of information on it, compiled by our colleagues in the past. However, for an audience who are listening this issue for the first time, I would like to bring out this issue is dated back to 17th and 18th centuries also. And this is a period where the Anglo-Chinese conventions in 1819, there's a treaty delineating boundaries, and at that time it was the Bhutan was not a signatory. However, it was carried out, a boundary as defined, and later on the disputes are now moving around in an area where the legal rights of countries on this, because there are discussions, the stance of China per se has changed over a period of time, and sometimes even now they agreed to the watershed principle, where the slope of the mountain, the water flows is considered, the top of the mountains are considered as a boundary, but uh, they have agreements at time, but they are continue to engage in the construction activities. Now, the Chinese side still remains under a constant agreement that they believe that this portion and the part of Bhutanese territory they have occupied are under them, and that has resulted in a dispute and forcefully taken by them on this important piece of land.
What you said, it seems very fascinating. Like if you see the present context from the historical lens, like what is now independent country of say India, China, or for that matter Bhutan. That time it was a British India, and it was a king dynasty that was ruling China. It was an imperial state, Two of them were negotiating about a piece of land that belongs to today's Bhutan, of which Bhutan was not a signatory. And still, like, I think rather than moving forward, people are trying to move backward and trying to interpret those treaties. That is something really fascinating, as I have pointed out.
Yeah, but the stands are also changed over a period of time. They were not when I look at the literature, it implies that the stands are not same as what they are saying currently. It's not most of the time it dated back in history. That area was largely unnoticed by them also. And again, when these principles are laid down, it is mostly like it is very difficult for people to draw a boundary from a cartographic perspective as well. And it requires people an immense visit to these places to draw a boundary. But it didn't happen when the boundaries are delineated. So these are some of the nitty-gritties exist on these boundary issues. However, there are terms which are agreed by all the three countries. So those are the things which people needs to follow instead of changing their stance over a period of time.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Fine. Nitya, like in this issue of newsletter, you talk about Chinese intrusion in Bhutan's Monchu River. So, how will it affect Bhutan? And the second part of this, like if you help us understand, what would be strategic impact on India?
So the Mochu River is originating from Bhutan and on the borders with Tibet, and it flows further south, and it goes on this critical area as well. The importance of the Chinese shelters on this Mochu River has gained prominence because on one side the Bhutanese are claiming that the China has not constructed anything on our territory, whereas we can clearly see this is in a disputed area. On the other side, the Chinese government representative was saying that we have constructed these villages in this area, and people are, encouraged to go, or you can say the people are already there to some extent. But what the satellite images and other open source intelligence input indicates, the activities on this area are limited, and it more appeared to be a dual purpose shelter which may be used by military personnel as well as to some of people who support the or who are required for the military related activities, who may be a civilian on this region, because there is very limited scope for developmental activities in the region or for any other livelihood activities in the region. This the any shelters on this area perhaps indicate a potential dual purpose shelter. That is why we are inferring out of the satellite images. Now, there are two important aspects to note down. The one is all the settlement are happened on the, let's say, on the western side of the Mochu River. That's because the western part is more associated with this occupied Doklam region, in which the land areas are cleared over a period of time. If you look back to history, the land areas of one particular area is cleared out and the villages are set up, and thereafter they are moving towards the south, and they are moving further into the Mocho River. All this happens on one side of the river, because the other side of the hill is not remains untouched, and it is connected to land with Bhutan um, geographically, whereas this side is connected to the Chinese occupied Doklam region. Now, it is having a significance, I would say, instead of strategic importance, I would say significance, because there is another set of fear reported in a couple of newspaper articles that the occupation, the Chinese presence in this region may provide an alternate route to you know um, the Doklam standoff point, where Mochu River can again connected with Toshanola, and people believe they can come up through the same point by another direction, since we have fortified the other area. But what we can look at when we look at the elevation, when we look at the other geographical data sets, it's pretty challenging for anybody to maneuver from that point. And it is not happening near possible. It could be perhaps an imagination that it could, uh, you know, create a threat. But however, despite the fact, any presence on any civilian or military presence closer to this critical area is considered as an important point to note and also to monitor regularly.
Like carrying forward this question, like like if you see this whole area, like this is a like ecologically very sensitive region, and on top of that, like this is in the Himalayan area, and Himalayan, as you know, is a, like this is still growing mountainous region, so there are a lot of geological upheaval. So how you see this construction and human activity, like, and how it will impact, like more than it's being a issue with India China, or India Bhutan or China, like India, China, Bhutan, they're all stakeholders of this region, and this is a ecologically, I would say, not only sensitive but fragile. Like this large scale, like if you human intervention. So, like, do you see some ecological disaster in making?
Uh, in this case, not much, especially in this region, because the footprint is too small. Though there are few minor modifications has happened on the route of Mochu River, but reminds the land area which are cleared and the construction activity which has happened is very small in this area. So I would say the things which we are considering compared to what happens in Yedong, the other side of Yedong County, where we expect a world largest dam. Here, that kind of intense activity or intense ecological disaster are limited. However, the presence in Doklam Plateau is, which may not affect civilians in a sense, because not many people resides closer to that particular point. However, this is a scenario with the Chinese side, where the nearest habitation exists in the Yadong County, in a valley, couple of kilometers from there. But this any of this new adventure on this area or massive construction, if it happens in future, may impact the other side people on Bhutani side and the other areas. Luckily, on one side of this plateau, we have a very sensitive areas, but just cut just cut it. Whosoever is editing, please cut the luckily part. It is not coming. So luckily, on three sides of this is surrounded by the land area, and one side of it is surrounded by Mount Gimochen, and very less habitation around it. So because of this, we can't expect a similar disaster like we can expect it from other places.
Like moving forward, for first time ever, the Bhutanese foreign minister Tandi Dorji visited China and met Chinese foreign minister Wang Li on 23rd October 2023. So, and this is, even more interesting and fascinating, because despite the fact that Bhutan and China do not have officially established diplomatic relation, so how you see its impact on India Bhutan relation? And in this context, as we are talking about Doklam and how it impact India's position on Doklam.
So I would see this. There's a lot of speculation already going on this, and it is unclear to us at this moment what exactly happened and what exactly agreed. But whatsoever, if the Bhutan decides to give off the standoff point, which is closer to the Indian border, and in lieu of the land patches where the dispute exists on Bhutan's northern part, this will be a critical thing for India. Instead of a trilateral issue, it may end up as a bilateral issue. So we may it gives more clear signal to China to occupy more on this region. So that is one. Second, however, the foreign minister who visited China has indicated that India's interest would be preserved, and any of the discussion related to the disputed territory will include India, since it is a trilateral issue that involves countries like India, China, and Bhutan. So that's a good sign. So that's a good part. And the Bhutan also shown interest and also ensured that they need more support from India, and they have ensured they are on Indian side on this issue. And there are a lot of cooperations which has signed and happened during the the Bhutanese king visit to India. So this, for a moment, looks like things which are not happening at this moment. But a few things like the agreement between Bhutan and China on delineating boundaries together, redefining boundaries together, or delineating boundaries together is something which we need to closely monitor, and that could be a concern to us if it is two country which is involved instead of three country.
So hopefully, like the way it is happening, like it is not only a test for India and Bhutan relation that date. India and Bhutan has a long history. So I think both countries need to see this emerging threat that is impacting their relation. And moreover, I think like India also need to see how it can both strategically beef up its security in the border region, not only by building a better infrastructure, but also taking the countries like in this case Bhutan into confidence, and whereby they are able to resist China's intrusion in their territory. So, like, do you want to add something to that, or
Yeah. So just to give a add something to it, what we can see in this region is well. I'm sure enough of measures are taken by people who are from different, enough of measures are taken from people at Indian side. But what is actually required, or what is actually highlighted in our document is we looked at the historical changes in soon after 2017. We looked at what and when and where the things have happened, and what level the intensification happens. This is something we sort of brought out from our article. And secondly, for people who are hearing about this issue for the first time, this place has gained prominence because um, there was a time when the country's focus on related to military aspects were largely laid on Pakistan, and standoff here between the countries has actually shifted our focus from Pakistan to China. And the period when we looked at and started fortifying our own uh, strengths, and also to trying to overcome our own challenges exist on the region. So I'm sure now we are having enough of mechanism to overcome the limitations that we had there. At the same time, it is crucially important to look at what others are also doing on a parallel note. So this is what made this article and the study on this place where very important. We would definitely be looking at more on this area, especially the future developments, and from specific sites which we covered, and we have little more understanding and geospatial analysis on these areas, so that we will try to uncover in subsequent articles. So this is in India. In short, in India, China, the military context, this place remains a critical spot for watch from both the sides.
Thank you so much, Nitya, for your insight. And with this, we'll end today's podcast.
Thank you, Kingshu. It was pleasure to meet you again. We look forward to connect to some other time as well. Have a good day. Bye.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.